Glenn Bell will give us more about the concept, as well as Bibu Sarvista, the concept, and the, a little bit of the use case, yeah, the concept and the use case. But then, for panelists, we'll talk about their effort and what they achieved so far, either in Philippines, either in Indonesia, as well as in Mongolia. Yeah, cool? Okay. And then I give the mic to Glenn for the first presentation.
We've done quite a lot of work in open contracting areas, especially related to implementation of OCDS standard as well with our partner organization here in Jakarta, International Procurement Watch. We did a couple of scoping studies on the open contracting landscape with HIVOS in Indonesia as also in the Philippines. We also did a couple of workshops with the World Bank related to the open contracting activities as well. So next slide. So yeah, so the concept of open contracting. Open contracting is about publishing and using timely, accessible, and open government procurement data in order to engage with the citizens and the business in order to solve problems related to public activities. So there are 4 key words there. So publish, use data, and then engage, and also solve problems. Conducted online, so through their electronic procurement system. But in they are in the process of including procurement related to the civil work as well. So that big procurement budget as well. But some of the data is not available in machine-readable format, or if the data is available, it cannot be downloaded. So people, civil society, must download the data manually and then do the data scraping in order to be able to analyze the data. Same case for the government as well. So it's difficult to do data analysis based on data that is not machine readable and also not downloadable as well. So what the World Bank did was that they did an assessment of level of transparency in Argentina in comparison to the OCDS standard, open contracting data standard, and then recommend to implement OCDS by also providing functions, a list of functions needed to sort of implement the OCDS as well. Going beyond that, they will do, once they have the implementation OCDS implement, they will be able to do data analytics in order to understand performance of the procurement system, but they also be able to do visualization or facilitating data used by non-state actors. And this is a very important point here, where you have this engagement principle, where non-state actors will also be able to participate in analyzing and monitoring of procurement performance as well. And later my colleague will be able to tell more details about how this will be actually done in both the national level and subnational level as well. So next, talking about the data, what data should be published? So as I said, structured and systematic data is key ingredients for open contracting. And using the open data 5-star model, you have you normally start with the basic level and then move up to the advanced and extension level. So basic level, basically, most of countries that have e-procurement system will be able to have this basic level where you publish tender and our notice in a PDF file. But you can also go up intermediate level now with this information and data format, you will be able to actually monitor progress of procurement or performance of procurement over time. Once you reach advanced level, you will be able to integrate data, the procurement data with other data, or you'll be able to link procurement data with other data in order to provide more context to your analysis, like linking procurement data with the budget data or location-based data to provide more context in your analysis as well. This needs to be done using more technical system, API, or some sort of data systems that you can link your data with other data as well. So next, next slide. Yeah, so implementation of structured and standardized data is important, but in order to be able for people to build reusable tools, once you have standardized data, you can also compare the data with other entities. But you can also build tools that can be used across agency or entities as well, because you now have a system with the standardized data as well. But implementation of this is not enough, and there are social factors that actually also affect implementation of open contracting. And next, in August actually this year, 2017, we conducted in partnership with World Bank a workshop on open contracting governance, attended by a representative of the government from 10 countries in South and Southeast Asia. And we asked them to map their procurement steps indicated by the green cars there, which is we call ladders. And then we also asked them to identify what are the challenges for you to be able to implement open contracting successfully for each of these procurement steps. So we call it that snakes, the challenge as snakes. And the result, next slide, there are a couple of things noted from the workshop. These are those. Number one is the commitment from the government that includes legal system to ensure implementations of the open contracting initiative as well. But you also need the political support, not only to provide the leadership, but also you also need to have a sustained financial support in order to implement it. Engagement with and capacity in stakeholders is important, because we need to be able to build a good value propositions for each.
Because when B. Bhusan mentioned something about open contracting being procurement, I suddenly had a flashback of how long I was working on this domain. So, not to give away my age, I have been working on this sector for like almost half of my career in development.
Forever.
Yeah, technically forever. I was there when, in 2003, the Philippines passed the Government Procurement Reform Act, where we had a very good provision to have civil society observers be part of the procurement process. That was one thing that we really fought for as civil society, to have that space and for us to be able not only to influence government, but also to make sure that, procurement as it should be done, should actually be done by the government properly in a transparent and accountable manner. However, fast forward to 2017, we have seen a lot of challenges. There was a shrinking space where donor funds had to be reallocated because they had different key performance areas, or they had different targets. that basically resulted to some civil society organizations that really focused on procurement to either close shop or to change their advocacy. But that's one thing. The other thing is also the need for us to be able to speak the language that government was actually speaking, for us to be heard. And from a shift that that we were once talking about procurement, then we suddenly had to shift to budgeting. But then in all of those spaces, as you know, are a part of the public finance management cycle. What we wanted to make sure was that civil society was also always there to make sure that government was efficient, transparent, and accountable. So procurement, as always, has been a very technical subject. When we talk about procurement, sometimes people say, what do I know about it? Why are you expecting me to participate in something I do not understand? But sometimes we do need to break that down a little by little. It's about increasing the quality of life. It's about having that road constructed for you to be able to go to where you're supposed to go to the market at a more efficient and fast pace instead of you walking along a dirt road. It's having school buildings being built so that your child will not go to school with a tree shading him from the sun. It's about textbooks that make sure that your child knows what is happening and how he can actually or she can actually keep up with schoolwork. And it is also about medicines, making sure that in public health you do get the medicines that you need. However, like what they have also said, procurement is also about data. In any given time, if someone here can tell me how many kilometers of roads are being built right now in your country, I would give you a prize, or Ilham will give you a prize. But I am betting a ball of candies that you do not have that data. Having said that, in the Philippines, what we actually did before was having people do the monitoring themselves. It meant a lot of overhead costs. It meant at least 3 months of time, of volunteer time, going to different government agencies, sitting down while bids or tenders were being opened. But then what the law was silent about that time was whether we can actually monitor contracts that are being implemented. But of course, people are creative. We do get what we want, in a sense. So we work with government champions, as they said. Eventually, we got copies of contracts that were usually not available for us to be able to monitor procurement and know whether or not a particular road should be built in a particular time frame, or how much a 20-kilometer of road costs, and compare this with other roads of the same length being built in a different city. But the process was very difficult. It meant that we needed to build trusting relationships. It was a one-to-one relationship that we had. Contracts were given in confidence. So going out and saying something that, there is an anomaly happening here, also meant that the champion you are working with in government is putting a lot at stake. So how do you do that? How do you form that uneasy coalition where you need to hide the identities of people who would want to share data with you because they believe in your ideal of transparency and accountability, but at the same time trying to influence government because you know that something should be done. 2 more minutes. So having said that, we have now moved forward to open contracting. However, as I said, there are several CSOs who have folded up or have changed their advocacies. Open contracting is again something new. Even if we talk about it being procurement, it is still something new. But then what we are hoping to do right now is to raise the awareness of CSOs and of government on why open contracting is needed in the Philippines, on why we would want to focus on access to data, the use of data, and why civil society and even individuals need to engage in data. One thing that I would like to focus on are the partners that we're working with. HIVOS is now supporting Bantay Kita or Publish What You Pay Philippines because their work on the extractive sector is very good. What they're trying to do is to work with local community organizations to be able to know how to use the extractive industry data that is already published and use this for negotiation purposes. How do you empower communities? That's building capacities. We're working with the Integrity Initiative. It's a private sector-led organization. But here, the interesting part here is that we're not talking about anti-corruption. We're not even talking about transparency or accountability. What we're talking about is increasing competitiveness. Because for them, that is the language that they speak. And for them, that is the language that the local government understands. So slowly, we're getting there. We have actually convinced them to publish procurement data, to publish contracts, and to publish minutes of meetings of tenders happening, something that not all government agencies are open to doing, because that places them in a very vulnerable position. But because the city of Muntinlupa wanted more investors coming in, then we spoke the language. It was the language of increasing local competitiveness. We have also been working with the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism because in the Philippines, the alignment of OCD as data is only 50%. So we wanted to know what was happening, why are we stalling? So they had to go to several national government agencies to see whether, do you know what OCDS is, or are the data that you are actually posting on the website similar to the data that we are posting in the national platform, the e-procurement system that we have. So right now we think, or I think, because I work in the Philippine domain, is that we're at the cusp of something good happening in the Philippines, where we think that slowly, by having government or national government and local government agencies understand what open contracting is and being able to speak the language that they are used to speaking, we would be able to push for more transparency, to push for access to data, to push for data that can be used by civil society and individuals to engage in. We have several enabling institutions, but those things right now are areas where we think we need more work on, because open contracting as a concept is still very alien to them. So we speak the language of procurement. And when we look at challenges, I think the main challenge right now, aside from having a president that is, I don't know, that breaks my heart and several people's hearts, is that the discussion of access to data and data privacy, that is something that we need to be able to address. Because most of the time, data that is supposedly public, like contracts, now are being redacted because of data privacy, and that is something very real happening in the Philippines right now. So hopefully what we intend to do over the next few months or even the next 2 years is to be able to shape the discussion there and make sure that contracting data is of public interest and should be open and not be, redacted just because of the data privacy law.
What I also want to add to the colleague's presentation earlier is, for those of you who are hearing open contracting for the first time, like if you look into the literature and if you look into the website, people get scared, very honestly. Like when I talk with my government people, they're like, we don't know what to do with it. But if you look into the essence of open contracting, it is actually not the technology side. It is about the public procurement reform, which I think is happening in many of our countries, right? So when we talk about open contracting, and even in open contracting, I tend to be, being a technical guy in the panel like this, we tend to talk about things called OCDS, which is Open Contracting Data Standard. We talk about JSON, XML, APIs, and most of the time we intend to get rid of 90% of people in the floor because we talk about JSON and APIs. But whatever it is, it's all about procurement data standardization. We're talking about standardizing the procurement data which does not only means contract, right? Since, because we're using the word open contracting, often we tend to think that it is only about the contract. It's only about that particular piece of document that is signed by the government and the contractor. Actually, when you talk about procurement cycle in open contracting, we start with planning, then move on to tendering process, then awarding, then contracting, and finally the implementation of the contract. So it actually includes the entire cycle from planning of procurement till execution. So please do not get surprised when you actually try to see so many things, right? And earlier, our colleague from the Web Foundation talked about use cases. Let me spell out those use cases, which has been the bedrock for the standard that has been created. And these use cases are, number one, value for money. Making sure that the public contracts actually deliver, right? And value for money. Second, detecting fraud and corruption. So the standard has been developed in a way that it is possible for civil society organizations and watchdogs to extract some leads that could actually detect fraud and corruption, so that we do not need to dive into investigative journalism for every single contract in the country, which is impossible to do, right? Third is competing for public contracts, and this is linked with inclusion of small and medium enterprises to be part of the contract. So you would see in many countries, like for example, Ukraine has been a global hero in open contracting. There, one of the indicators is increase in number of competitors in the procurement process. So earlier they used the national metrics of comparing how many contractors were there in the past versus at the moment, right? And so that is also included in a way in the standard. And finally, monitoring service delivery, which is the core area of civil society organizing. So in this sense, I think for civil society and others present in the room, OCDS actually makes sense. And you need to work with a little bit of tech person like ourselves, and there are so many in Indonesia. I'm happy to have been engaged with Ilham and the community here, so you can see that. So now, actually this is my presentation now, and my 5 minutes starts now.
Okay.
So I just want to touch upon a little bit of experience from Nepal. As you can see in the slides, what we've done in Nepal is we've worked really hard for over the past 2 to 3 years to pull out an initiative called Public Procurement Transparency Initiative in Nepal, short PPTIN, right? So that actually is the open contracting implementation. Now, if you look into the chart that is there in the top, we have divided the project activities into two sides. One focused on the supply side and the other on the demand side. And on the supply side, we have a centralized e-procurement system within the government, which is not standardized, which is not as per OCDS standard. So the work on supply side is more on making sure that the data that is coming out of our centralized procurement system follows the OCDS standard without even touching the system that has been developed, right? So you see OCDS/API kind of thing, which is the technology, standardized technology that we have used. So public entities enter data into the procurement system by law. They have to do it. Now we are working with the government to standardize that data, right? And eventually that data goes out to the open contracting portal, right? So we're trying to play safe without even touching the centralized procurement system. And with this portal on the demand side, now that is accessible to people at large. So even without saying it is known to all, we're saying we are focusing more on accountability intermediaries like CSOs, TIs, and other accountability intermediaries, and then citizens and other stakeholders as demand side. So we work on both sides through technical assistance, capacity development, deep dive into selected sectors, and of course, based on use cases, what are the problems that we want to address is the first question that we ask before even designing the capacity development interventions, for example. And directly engaging with people who have been monitoring, with CSOs who are monitoring infrastructure projects, so on and so forth. And eventually the objective is to create an open contracting ecosystem. Because as you can see, as I said, like open contracting involves a lot of technology, so we need to have technical people on board, we need to have civil society, government, so we need to be thinking about is as an ecosystem. So that is largely the open contracting initiative in Nepal, and I can talk for 2 hours about that if you're interested later on. But I want to focus on key lessons that we've learned over the past 2 years. Is one, we need to start at the right foot. when we started, we again talked about tackling corruption, transparency, and approached one of the secretaries. He says, like, can you please walk off my door, right? Then we've learned the factor and said, like, we need to incentivize, right? Which means, you know, if we go there and say, like, we want to highlight the successful projects that you have done, completed in time, which eventually is like 0.5%. But if you speak that language, they'll say, okay, fine, let's talk about the projects that were completed in time. And that is your entry point, right? And do not wait for the complete implementation, which means, I said, like, it's a complete list of planning till implementation. But if you look into our portal, which I'm going to share later on, it does not have much of a data on award and implementation, right? So we're starting with only, even if we are there on only stage 2, we are implementing open contracting, right? And we need to be supporting, offering technical support, which means not just saying that we are advocates of open contracting, but again, we've helped the government design the EDP system. We have given our technical recommendations, so on and so forth, and government ownership and support is absolutely critical. And doing this, what has really worked, and I think it was also mentioned earlier, is about working with champions at different levels. Because you cannot be confident that the entire system will work for you. So you need to identify champions within your oversight agencies, within the government, within the parliamentarians, so on and so forth, even within the civil society, right? Can we go next, please? And this is just an example. This is our portal, PPIP, Public Procurement Information Portal, which happens to be one of the first in the region, I'd say, in Southeast Asia region. This is actual implementation of open contracting. And as you can see on the top left, there is a logo of the government, which means this is formally approved by the government of Nepal, right? And if we move next, so this is next slide, please. Yeah. This is an example of champions. For example, he was young, dynamic, he's still young, dynamic political leader who also was a former Minister of Health. So he's been the champion at the political level, right? So when he was at the Ministry of Health, he was the one who came to our present meetings and delivered keynote sessions. So we're actually building his capacity. And on the right, you could see, because he's an elected representative, right? So what he's doing is like using the data that we produce in OCDS. So he has a dedicated Facebook page for citizen engagement. So that data is there, and he has now mobilized volunteers to take pictures of the progress that's happening. And then, because his constituency members are already in this space now, right? So it's like, there's an incentive for him to do that. Of course, there's a political incentive, but more than that, we see this as a champion-led use case of actual data that we are producing. Next, please. Similarly, this, our very first the civil society organization actually using that data and then developing mobile app. We help them develop that app, going to the field and monitoring projects. So that's the actual use of data, right? Next, a few other recommendations. Can we move that? The other is like engagement at a very early stage. Normally what we tend to do is like wait till the final implementation and think about engagement, right? So this is where like tech, the community, private sector, civil society, which is very important. And as I said, we have global use cases for open contracting, but what are your national use cases or regional or provincial or use cases? That is something that we need to develop, right? And awareness and capacity development. This is not easy. You need to invest time, resources in having this kind of workshops, orientation. It's because it's not just about yet another data portal that is live and you expect people, thousands of people to actually make use of that. Some evidence to say that, can we move on next? Is, for example, in Open Data Day 2017, we had a session on open contracting, and these amazing young girls were the winning team that actually developed tools based on data that we've generated. So engagement of the tech community right at the start, right? Next slide is, again, we had this participatory workshop for coming up with national use cases. And in that picture, you could see people from the government, civil society actually coming together to say what are our use cases for open contracting implementation in Nepal, right? And the other, as I said, is sectoral pilot, because we cannot be everywhere when we start, right? And take advantage, because what our Public Procurement Act says is like, in its essence, it says transparency, accountability, blah, 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 all those nice words, right? And what we're saying to the minister is, this is actual practice of transparency that you have envisioned in your law, right? So through our champion, we've been able to convince that. We're not saying that you have to change everything. We're just saying, taking advantage of what exists, and aligning OC implementation with existing work of stakeholders, which means, for example, the kind of champion CSOs that we're working with, they are actually working on monitoring of different projects. Now we are simply helping them streamline their work by making use of the data that we produce in OCDS. And of course, taking advantage of international platforms is the key. In most of I think we're the only country in the room where we are not partners to OGP, right? Not a member country. But still, I think this is where, like, open contract, because we've worked in other countries as well, we can see that open contracting is slowly taking the center stage. And this is where a lot of country action plans have OC implementation as one of their agenda, despite not being part of the OGP country at all. We are also taking advantage, and I can show examples. Can we move on next slide? Is, for example, this is what I meant. If you look into our portal, these are selected 7 pilot agencies, like roads, health, urban development, so on and so forth, where we are actually building capacity of these ministries to actually consume data by themselves, right? So this is what we mean. And finally, the next slide, please, is, for example, in this November, we were smart enough to announce the launch of portal in the international open contracting meeting. Now this is news at the local level. So now we've said that we have launched the portal, right? Which means we are now taking advantage of that international gathering, saying that Nepal has launched and people are proud about that, so that it will help us in implementing things further.
It's a pleasure to meet you all. Today, I want to discuss with you about the progress of open contracting in Indonesia. Can I have my presentation, please? Okay. Yeah, so beforehand, all of us know that corruption is epidemic here. So a lot of organizations working on the issues, and somehow Anti-Corruption Commission findings that 30% of public funds lost because of there are no openness on procurement system, and the case, almost 80%, the case in the police, attorney, or even in corruption commissions find out that all are come from public procurement. So since 2006, my organization working on advocating how to make this public procurement system open. We investigate, and it's hard for us to find the data. Somehow, now we are on progress. Yeah, we are on progress, and it's still blank.
Yeah, sometimes when we talk about technology and then technology let us down.
Okay.
So, human dimension,
Yeah, okay.
please.
Indonesia has champion. Bibu already said about champion. Glenn also say that. We already have champion. They have an institution named National Procurement and Policy Agency. They are the ones who set up in 2008 national or centralized procurement system in Indonesia. Somehow, until today, we already have almost 750 units working, almost all institutions in Indonesia, from national level until hospital, university. They have open procurement system working with the NPP. So long ago, we only have like 11 voluntarily local government and government institutions. But somehow now, all like the police, national police, school, following this system. Next, please. So parallel with the tools we built, like the system we built, Indonesia also making public procurement reformation. So we work on legislative and regulatory framework. Hopefully, we will have a new regulations on procurement, and we also have institutional framework for the organization who deal with procurement system. And also now the business sector involving a lot on how to make integrity and transparency working on the public procurement. Next, please. Here is the roadmap or the system now, national procurement managed by the National Procurement and Policy Agency. If we compare to OCDS, working from planning until monitoring and evaluation, also learning process of innovations, Indonesia already has the system. Somehow, the progress on OCDS or the standard, we still working on it. We already have in planning system, we have SIRUP. Now people can easily connect the visions or the strategic plan of the city or the institutions with the development implementation process. Like, is it right that the city will build the road? How much is it? And who's working on this? Which company belongs to who? The company, the owner of the company. Now in Indonesia, we already know about that's all information. And also now, we try to simplify the procurement process into e-tendering, e-purchasing, and e-catalog, because I think it's also the same with other countries. Sometimes hospital, they bought the same medicine or equipment, but it has different prices for the same medicine. Now, with e-catalog, the procurement process can be simplified. And people also now can easily calculate themselves. If the bus, the price is almost like 1 billion rupiah, they can compare. If the bus is bad, and they said, okay, we lost, something like that. And next, please. All of these, we have the data, and compared to the OCDS result, now people know and easily connecting or correlate the value for money, as Ibu San and Glenn said. ICW trying to campaign to the people how to use the data, like how to make the farmers in the villages know how much fun they have to build the school or women's activity, so they will know how much it costs and the quality. As well as for the business sector, they also having competing contract. They will know who wins the contract and why. Yeah, so it's the merit basis we know. And now a lot of litigation process because of these issues, yeah, competing contract. 2 more minutes, okay.
OpenStandard.net.
Okay, please. Now, connecting to detecting fraud and corruption. Indonesia Corruption Watch work with National Procurement Agency, working how to detect corruptions. So we work with them. We get the APA data, and now we already send some people, the Ministry of Religions, to the jail, and also some. Now we're still in the process with the parliament member, the strongest person, because of the national identity cases. When we see the data, people can easily try to correlate the quality of the services. So it's not only for us, the investigation organization, but also for the farmers, also for the women organization. They can easily see and detect corruption or fraud. And the results mostly on how the quality of public services. So they will know how much money they have to spend. Next. So this is the opportunity to apply OCDS in Indonesia. Somehow we have a million people have access to internet, as well as our server and also procurement system are getting stronger. Somehow we have challenges, especially in the political arena. Next, please. In OCDS, we're talking about tools, and Indonesia already have one, centralized procurement system. We already have the data as well, and the business process already reformed. It's disclosed, we have procedure, regulation, etc. But somehow the people within the government, the people within the business, and the people, us as a public, that's an issue, challenges for us now. How to make the data is readable, usable. So that's why we need CSO academicians as an intermediary to make people know or easily understand what is open contracting. Next, please. So, and also for us, for ICW, it's a challenge when we have engagement with the government and the business sector. For the government, is it prevention, anti-corruption preventions, or is it taking them to the jail? So it's an issue how to make this openness and also has a goodwill from the government sectors that they are not only watch but engage. Next, sir. So this is our, we work with HIVOS in Bandung case. We try to implement OCDS, working also with the World Bank. They work on the tool sector, so they prepare the system, etc. And ICW working on how to prepare people in Bandung to understand, to use the data that provided by Bandung government. Bandung has Bandung Integrated Resource Management System. Next, please. They already set up from planning, musrembang, we call it e-musrembang. So e-planning, and then e-budgeting, e-procurement, e-contracting, and then e-monitoring. Somehow, the OCDS standard trying to implement one by one in the process. Hopefully it will work in Bandung, because sometimes it's a paradox when the system is already there, but why corruption and bribery still happen? So that's why some organization working in the system and us working with the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Men going to jail for 5 or 6 years until now. They still in jail. So we have a bad corruption on there, and at least until now we have a 6 head of agencies going to jail too. So yeah, we have a problem in the corruption at the time. So we start opening all in Bojonegoro with head of the government, the mayor. And then in 2014 and 2015, we start to, after we have a good mechanism in handling complaint mechanism, we start to digitalize the complaint mechanism. We have Siap Lapor, a platform for the for the staff president at the time. We adopt in Bojonegoro, and then in 2016 we have a momentum with the OGP. So we push to the government to involve the open contracting into the action plan. So next, please. That's the story how the open contracting set up in Bojonegoro. And then we try to have some agreement with other stakeholders, because open contracting sometimes cannot happen with if the government not on your I want to say that the government not openness, not open yet. So we push that the government and the business sector to get let's say the new platform that everybody can see the procurement and the process before and after. Because you know that corruption is not only get in the procurement system, but the corruption sometimes set up in the very early stage. I mean, in the development planning, and then budgeting, and blah 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 after, and then open contracting, and then payment, and etc. etc. So we in Bojonegoro try to have agreement with parliament and the business sector and the other civil society and the government to choose the platform, what the platform that can be used for all to ensure that everybody can track, everybody can monitor the process, the development process. But at the time we have a misunderstanding about the open contracting. What we know at the time is open the contract, just open the contract. You know that there is the third party have a project from the government, they have a contract, so the contract will be published to the public. The document is in PDF and GPX version. So yeah, you can see the first version in Bojonegoro. The contract of the third party who implement the project in Bojonegoro, let's say infrastructure or health or a road, you can see at the website. But it's only a contract. Like if Busan say that open contracting is not only you open the contract, but the process after, before the contract you must to open too. So we believe at the time, I take the slide from the open contracting partnership. We believe that the open contracting can detect the fraud and the corruption. We can increase the competition because you know that once you have the document of the contract, you know the budget. Let's say we have an irrigation project, we know the budget. How much the cement price are, how much the sands price are, how many people work in this project. So it is the budget that people can see in the portal, in the website. So we designed this platform to public can easily track the contracting at the first time. Next slide, please. And this is the open contracting in Bojonegoro. We have two versions. The first is about, like I said before, the contract is only published in a JPEG and PDF format. This is include the public complaint and monitor system, so public can easily give a feedback or comment on each contract that published. And then the contract is GPS based, so people can easily track where is the location of the projects are. And yes, the data is still in the PDF format. But the second version that we develop right now is about, we want to compatible with the OCDS version because we want to connect all the pace of development process in Bojonegoro. I mean that, like Sally said that, we have a planning development, we have a budgeting, we have open contracting of project implementation, and then payment, and then audit. We want to integrate all the platform so people can easily check who proposed the project of irrigation, for example, and then whose member on parliament changed the budget, for example. And then why this company, why that company win this project, doing this project. And it is in one platform, so people can easily track and synchronize in other platform with of course, it's a technically acknowledged. It's Bibusan mentioned that API or something like that. So yeah, it is more technically work. Yes, this is the slide that I take from the open contracting tool. We want to go to the 5 stars.
Wow.
5 stars is about in planning you have you have to put your GPS location of your project, and then your document should be in live data, SLS or CSV. So not only people can read your data, but machine can read your data. It is important because sometimes when you have 1,000 data, you can read it, but machine can do that. So now, okay, this is the design of the next open contracting in Bojonegoro. I think in 2018 we can see the new platform and we can see it. How the platform works, because now we have a 2 version, and this design is for the 3rd version. Like Bibusan said that you have to start your implementation of open contracting now. Just don't wait your data complete. Start with data, and then you have so many versions. It's okay. And next. Okay, now we have local regulation. It's been a major degree for the sebagai dasar aturan, sebagai consideration or law in Bojonegoro, but it's not strong enough because we have in province don't have the rule, and the central government doesn't have a rule too. Our strategy is how to increase this status of the law. I mean that we push that this regulation cannot increase to the province regulation or the central government regulation. So it is easier another subnational government to implement the open contract mechanism. And then no. Just 30 seconds, okay? The last is about how to using the data. How to using the data, because it is important that, because if you have the data budget for the project, it's been like you have a project of infrastructure like of irrigation, for example. Let's say the aggregation of the project is you have 100 packet of irrigation project in your local government, and then you have a budgeting contract of your project, you can see that easier. You can see that how many cement that the local government needs in that years. How many ton of sands the business sector needs. How many people or labor that's involved in that project. So it will happen that the document of the contract is the live data, and then you have a machine, you have an application to aggregate and to mengolah, to manage or to using the data for your interests.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mixed, because last year we had parliament election and this year we had presidential election. So with the parliament election, the opposition won a landsliding victory. So they won 65 seats out of 76. So basically, so this action plan was designed with the previous government, with the Democratic Party. Now the People's Party has a different agenda, but still it's progressing, and so I'll just share some insights. So next, yeah. So resource contract database was designed by Open Society Foundation and Extractive Industry Transparency Initiatives Local Secretariat and the Ministry of Mines. So it has resource contracts. Basically, it's investment agreements and local cooperation agreements. So we call it local level agreements because there's many different types of naming for the local community development agreements. And so there's available 35 agreements. The number is actually it should be more than that, but it's only available, publicly available ones, so there's much more room to work on. And and there's some water use agreements, land use, and 2 production sharing agreements. Next. And the government also has a glass account website, so every agencies of the government agencies has the procurement planning and its implementation execution, and also they put the audit reports, but also it was with the previous government. So enforcement of that initiative is not a little bit problematic as of now. Also we have a central public procurement system in Mongolia, and so basically IT-based systems are all in place, but the enforcement of the systems and also accuracy of the data quality is also is problematic. So need stakeholders collaboration to ensure the validation of the data. So next. So about the NRG, so maybe most of you know the Natural Resource Governance Institute. It's an international independent non-profit organization, and so we also produce a resource governance index. It's the only international index which measures the resource governance of the country. So just a reference point, we could visit to the website. It's quite interactive. You can compare the regions and countries, and so as a reference point, yeah. And so next, please. So and you can see from the rankings, the different countries have the results varies a lot. So yeah, and so in the Mongolia case, it was in 15th, but actually under the real context, he's hidden behind the index because the index is basically average of things. So, but it captures what's working in Mongolia and what's not. So, but the average number took us in satisfactory, but many people back home doubt about that. So, and also the results differ significantly within regions. So you can see like Western Europe countries as the highest, and then so Eurasia, Asia Pacific is a little bit weak, or yeah. So basically the regions varies. Next please. And also within the regions, countries are also very different picture. So for instance, when you see Middle East and North Africa, then the difference between two countries are 30-something points, which is shows the regional within regional differences. Next, please. And NRG local office implemented interlinked activities to ensure the resource contracts situation in Mongolia, and did a research on the agreements, lessons learned, and way forward. And so the CDA, it's called the Community Development Agreements, but local level agreements, formal agreements between mining companies and local governments of the affected mining projects. And so it's an important mechanism to improve the value realize the benefits of the mining sector and avoid conflicts, and also provide a social license to operate. So next. Okay. So legal framework. So in mineral laws requires mineral license holders to establish local level agreements with the local governments, and also government developed the model agreement to create work and protect the environment and establish infrastructure related to mining operations. And also administrative law of Mongolia requires public consultation to before establishing local level agreements. So next please. And so since the implementation of the law since 2006, it's almost 11 years, only few agreements been made, and out of that, even less became publicly available. And so you can see, like all license holders, then 150 license holders, then there should be 150 contracts. But in reality, we have only 23 out of the 35 on the database available. And so from different provinces, so only few, the researchers could find only few contracts, research contracts. Next, please. And legal requirements actually doesn't motivate parties to establish local level agreements, and also it's been established to avoid the business risk and to get the social license to operate. And basically, foreign mining companies are establishing that agreements. Next, please. And yeah, institutional policy incentives are missing. And so in order to have that mineral exploitation contract, so it's need to link it to the project approval process, like in licensing process. So in order to obtain a license, it's a license learned. To obtain a license, the particular company need to agree with the local government and have a process, a negotiation with local community, and then agree on the content of the agreement, and also agree on implementation and monitoring, and then after monitoring and find ways to improve. And so, the other lesson is the parties are too focused on the content, not the process, because just people in order to receive benefits from the mining projects, local communities more interested in monetary obligations, but actually the long-term local development planning is very important. So actually after the mine company, so what are left is some holes, and people have no jobs and stuff. So basically you need to look at it sustainably. Okay, so yeah, and so basically, yeah, so next. So the recommendation is need to prioritize, because we need to have at this moment 1,050 contracts, but actually it's 23. Then need to prioritize and reduce number of local level agreements which need to be established, and incentivize the establishment of local level agreements, and also clarify the model agreement which was developed by the government, and develop and implement capacity building programs, and this support civil society organizations to monitor implementation. So that's the recommendations and lessons learned. So basically, now it's a new government, and the OGP implementation is was just now actually in October. New PM, the previous PM resigned, the new PM came over. So now until implementation of the the second action plan is just 6 months. So, and need to push